Welcome to the first session of the Anatomy of Food Animals module, which is a session on skeletal system. Again, my name is William Nelson and welcome to class. In this session, we are going to talk on the skeletal system and specifically the framework composed of bones of the body. And I will introduce to you briefly the anatomy of a skeletal system of food animals or animals, and later I will dwell into the comparative anatomy between different species of animals that are common in our setting. In terms of introduction, I won't talk much because most of anatomy is the same, because you did human anatomy and humans are also animals as well. So we first have the skull and the lower jaw. These two are separated because the upper jaw is part of the skull. And an important thing to note is that ruminant animals don't have the upper dentition as we do in humans. And then we have the vertebral column, which consists of the spine or the backbone. And you should remember these vertebral groups: the cervical, the dorsal-thoracic vertebrae, the lumbar, the sacral, and the coccygeal or the tailbone. And in each, you should know the number equivalent to a specific vertebral group and to a particular species of animal, which is presented here. And here, remember that the thoracic vertebra of a horse, which are the ribs here, consist of 18 numbers as compared to other species of animals. For the cervical, each species of animal, including a giraffe, which have the longest neck, it has the 7 cervical columns. The rest are almost similar. Then for the ribs, where the thoracic vertebra is, just to remember, we have ribs which are articulate with the sternum, which are referred to as true ribs, and we have ribs which don't reach the sternum, which are considered as false ribs. And within ribs are separated to each other by the intercostal muscles. And then you have the sternum, which is the breastbone. It will have 60 to 80 segments, depending on animal species. And then you have the sacrum, which is formed by fusion of the sacral vertebrae. And in most cases, because these sacral vertebrae are fused, is normally regarded as one bone. And then we have the os coxae, or the pelvic bone, which is made of 3 bones: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis. And together they make this groove where the femur is normally get attached, the acetabulum. Then we have bones of the forelimb, which are made of the scapula, the humerus, and the radius and ulna. The scapula is here, we have the humerus, and we have the radius and the ulna. But remember, cattle don't have ulna. They just have, it's fused, the radius and ulna are fused together, so we don't have ulna in cattle. And then we have the carpus, metacarpus, which goes down to the 2 digits, forming the phalanges. And for the hind limb, we start with the pelvic, the os coxae, which forms the acetabulum where the femur gets attached. And then we have the patella or the kneecap, and we have the tibia. And between the tibia and the metatarsus, we have the tarsus, the 2 bones of the tarsus here, which are also divided into 2 to 3 bones as well inside. And remember, for the hoofed animals, the digits are normally divided into 2, but each digit is also made up of 3 fused bones. These phalanges here, they are 3, but the digits are 2. And then now let's go into the differential features. This is where the focus of this module is. How are we going to differentiate the species of animals based on the structures of their bones? And we'll start with these almost identical animals: horse and ox. Under normal circumstances, if someone presents to you ox's bones and horse's bones, they will normally look identical. So how are you going to differentiate them? Let's start with the vertebral column. The first thing in the vertebral column is the first anterior dorsal vertebrae, which in horses, this is pinnace process here, is a little bit shorter and a little bit wider, so we call it strouter, but in the bovine, as you can see, it is very long. Okay, and for the ribs, in horses, the ribs are a little bit narrow, and they are more curved than in bovine. So in bovine, they're a little bit wider and they're curved. And as I said earlier, in horses, we have 18 pair of ribs, while in bovine or ox, we have 13 pairs. And then we have a scapula. The scapula, an important thing to narrow is this notch here, which exists in the bovine's scapula, but in horses' scapula doesn't exist. When you look at them anatomically, they almost look similar except for this notch here. Though there are some other features, like you see this groove here in the horse's bone, which doesn't exist here. And but sometimes it might be difficult to identify this groove as compared to this small notch here. In the horses, the humerus is made up of 3 tubes of bones, while in the bovine, these bones are 2. In terms of ulna here, you can see in horses, the ulna is a little bit extended upwards, and it goes almost halfway to the radius, while in the bovine, the ulna and the radius, as I said earlier, they are fused together. It's difficult to separate the two. And for the fibula, something that you should note, in bovine, this fibula here have a little bit hook-shaped. It's hook-shaped here, but in horses you can see it extends downwards towards the middle or the tooth. The middle of the bone. For the sheep, goat, and deer, these animals, they almost look the same size anatomically, but there are some few features that we can use to differentiate them. For instance, the bones of a goat and deer are more slender and longer than those of a sheep, and the bony processes are longer and more sharply edged than in sheep. The scapula of sheep is shorter compared to its breadth, and the edge of the spine in the center is thickened backward, while in the goat and deer it is straight and thickened. Those is which I might say might be difficult for you to identify, but these are the features that may be used to differentiate these 3. And why do we need to differentiate these 3 animals? Because deer might be of interest here, because it's a national animal that is in the national parks. So someone might have it and sell in the normal markets as they are selling goat or sheep. So range officers in the national parks, they can use these features to identify, to differentiate a deer from other species of similar kind. Unfortunately, I was supposed to use a dog to compare, but literature for dogs are a little bit limited for now. At least I have a cat and a rabbit. We normally raise and consume rabbits in our settings, and they are very common in Asian countries because they are sold in the supermarkets, but here it's rare. You can rarely find a rabbit in the supermarket. So how can you differentiate a cat and a rabbit? We start with the lumbar vertebrae. In the cat, it is pointed, whereas in the rabbit, there are 2 extensions, one backwards and one forward. In the cat, there are 13 pairs of rounded ribs, while in the rabbit, there are only 12 pairs. A rabbit has a very long metachromium on the scapula directed backwards, which is absent in the cat. And the tibia and the fibula in the cat are separated for their complete length. Like you can see totally 2 different bones, but in the rabbit, they are only upper half. The upper half, you might see the two bones, but as you go along down, they get fused together. The radius and ulna are separate in the cat, but united in the rabbit as well. And the coccygeal vertebrae in the rabbit are very small. I think you know rabbits have a shorter tail as compared to cats. That's even the coccygeal bone as well. Thank you very much. I hope to meet you again in the next session.